We want to bring in a couple of guests now, actually one of two. Our second will be with us in just a second. Congressmen from the suburbs, Sean Casten and Brad Schneider. Brad Schneider apparently waiting for an elevator. He got hung up.
It's a popular night. Everybody is waiting for an elevator somewhere in this building.
Right.
It absolutely is. So tell us how you're a super delegate. So how's it gone for you so far?
So this is my first convention, and it is just, the enthusiasm is so infectious. I mean, we went the start of, 4 weeks ago, everybody was saying, like, where's the vibe going to be here? What's going to happen? And through this event, every night there's more people saying, can you please get me a ticket? Can I volunteer? Can I help drive someone around? Can I do something to be a part of this? Last night I was at an event where it was a musical event, and the host said, Common is saying he would perform if we can give him a space because he wants to be here, and they didn't have the space for it. Like, that's sort of the vibe in the room right now, right? It's just wonderful. Like, everyone's got this sense of FOMO, like, you feel like you're making history. I was telling people, in 2 years, we're going to celebrate our 250th anniversary. And how inspiring is it to say I was a part of making the 250th anniversary of the day that our founder said all men are created equal, to have a black woman presiding over that moment. Like it just, everybody wants to be a part of that, and it's a special moment.
Okay, so one of the big speakers that we heard from last night was Oprah Winfrey. She was speaking directly to independents. She talked about how she is one and how there are so many who don't want to vote for Donald Trump and are trying to make a decision here. Let's talk about how you were able to get in office, specifically because in the suburbs, where a lot of times you may have more of your GOP voters, what do you think it takes to keep a Democrat in office about where you are?
So my theory of the case has always been that if you talk about bipartisanship in the sense of the voters, there's a tremendous amount of agreement among people. You ask people, like, did the right side win the World War II? Did the right side win the Civil War? Was the Enlightenment a good thing? Do we want our schools to be safe? Do we believe that everybody should have equal opportunity? Those are very bipartisan values. If you frame that instead of saying, well, I'm going to demonize this person because of the letter after their name, that doesn't work, right? And I think what happened when we had that wave in 2018 was a lot of people saying, we're not asking what party your affiliation is, we're asking what your values are, and just asking you to go and coordinate and say, I think we share the same values. You saw it from Tim Walz last night. Like, Tim Walz's values, once upon a time, a lot of that was the traditional Republican values. And as the Republican Party has really been captured by their extremist fringe, they've abandoned that middle group who's been left lonely. We're going to see Adam Kinzinger,
right?
Look, I served with Adam. Nobody would confuse him for. He came in with the Tea Party wave. No one would confuse him for being, someone who was a lefty by any stretch, but he got abandoned by his own party, right? And I think a lot of people felt that way as well, and then feel empowered to be a part of something that's a little bigger.
Yeah, okay, Congressman Schneider is joining us, and as we get him mic'd up here, let me ask you about the drum beat. And it was a steady drum beat and a growing louder drum beat for President Biden to step aside, and you were part of that drum corps, if you will. I think at a point where you spoke out, we had all seen the debate and couldn't unsee it, and I think it became more and more of an issue. When did you decide to speak up as you did?
Well, so, I think there were a lot of us. Number one, I speak for all of the Democrats, unbelievably tremendous respect for Joe Biden's competence as a president, for what he accomplished. He will go down in history as one of the most effective presidents. The question was, is he going to run an effective campaign that's going to make sure that works? And I think a lot of us were I was very much of the view that was a family conversation, not an outside conversation. And as those family conversations were moving on, I think a lot of us felt, in a very bittersweet sense, that we needed to start to use our outside voice, but make it abundantly clear that this was about putting us up in a position to succeed, and for the purpose of democracy. And I just have tremendous respect that Joe Biden, regardless of your profession, if you spent your entire career doing something and you're good at that thing, to step aside and to hand that torch over and set it up, it's just so much grace and so much dignity. And I think in the short term we can get caught up in the moment, but history is going to look just so fondly on his legacy.
Well, as we mentioned, our second panelist has now joined us, Brad Schneider. Thank you for taking the time, waiting in the lines, of course, for the elevator. We were talking right before you sat down about how everyone really wants to be in the room, and there's been a lot of momentum in terms of, sort of surrounding this candidate. And whereas maybe 30 days ago we might not have seen an audience like this, now we have packed hallways, packed elevators. I just want to get your thoughts on this momentum, especially going into the final night of the DNC.
I think we would have had a full house if President Biden was at the top of the ticket, but it would have been a different sense, a sense of purpose that we're going to have to do everything we can to get across the finish line in a race that was going to be very different than what we have now. And as Sean said, President Biden making the hardest choice anyone could possibly make to, after 50 years of serving his country, say, my time has come to pass the torch and bring in the next generation. By doing so, he's unleashed a level of energy that I don't think anyone anticipated what we would see. So we have a full house, as we would have had otherwise, but we have a house with a level of energy that is literally lifting the roof. And we have, not just here, but across the country, people excited to go out and knock on doors, make phone calls, talk to neighbors, talk to strangers, and say, we have a chance to determine the direction our country goes and determine that it's a direction that embraces joy, for one, that's what you're seeing here, but embraces the ideals and values we cherish as Americans versus the negative story that's coming from the other side. I think it's a really remarkable thing. It's incredible to be here.
It'll be interesting to see how history looks back at this, because I think we all remember the conversations that we heard all around, that it's too late, you can't change. If he steps aside, then who? Brokered convention. There's talk of a mini primary. It was surprising, I think, to everyone how quickly the Democratic Party coalesced around Kamala Harris, and in the end sort of proved, even Nikki Haley herself said, the first party that ditches their 80-year-old candidate is probably going to win. The Democrats listened.
Don't underestimate the deep competence in the Democratic Party, top to bottom. This is a party that was sitting there 4 years ago looking at the deepest decline in the economy since the Great Depression, the biggest spike in unemployment since the Great Depression, put a package together that turned the economy around, that led to faster growth than any other country in the world, faster collapse in inflation in the global inflation environment that was coming, passed the biggest climate bill in history, the biggest infrastructure bill in history, did that in 2 years in a divided government. Right? There is deep, deep competence. And to take nothing away from what happened, but by comparison, convincing another Democrat who's a fundamentally good person to put country first was maybe the easiest thing we've done in the last 4 years.
Sean, it was a divided government, but what we passed, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the PACT Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, these were all bills that were done in a bipartisan way. Democrats and Republicans working together, Democrats reaching across the aisle to say, let's put country first, let's move things forward and lift up the American people, protect American interests, and show American leadership throughout the world. And that's what we're seeing tonight and this week on stage here, is that the competence Sean talks about, deep and broad, Democrats are leading the way.
Let me just get one more question, because I think we have to let them go. But I wanted to ask about your situation where you had posters ripped out outside your office, I believe, right? There was some vandalism. What would your message be? They were pro-Israel posters that were
they were
down,
posters
right?
of the hostages that are being held by Hamas. They're as Rachel Goldberg said last night, they're people, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu. They are people from more than 20 countries. Rachel finished her remarks last night with the message, Hirsch, if you can hear me, I love you, I'm working to bring you home. Right. She had written that on the poster of Hirsch outside of my office and put it with a piece of tape. Someone tore them down. It was one person or a group of people, it doesn't matter. 2 days later, they were back up. What the message I have outside of my office, the message you saw on the floor last night, is we need to bring these hostages home. All 111, including the 8 Americans, bring them home, reunite them with the families. Those that are alive, help them get on the road to recovery. Those that are deceased, like Itai Chen, help his family have closure and bury their son.
What would you say to the protesters who are across the street now and have been marching?
You know, what I'd say to the protesters is what you heard here all week and last night. We all want this war to come to an end. We need to bring the 111 hostages home. There were 250 hostages taken. We need to surge aid into Gaza to give the people of Gaza a chance for a future. But as long as Hamas is holding hostages, is raining terror over Gaza, threatening Israel, neither Palestinians nor Israelis will have peace. But if we can bring this war to an end, if we can get that ceasefire and ultimately move towards a plan for the region around the Abraham Accords, normalization with Saudi Arabia, opportunities for a state for the Palestinians living side by side, a Jewish democratic state of Israel with peace and prosperity, that's the future we want for the region. It's good for the region. It's good for the United States.
Brad Schneider, Sean Casten, thank you both for joining us.